NASCAR is in meltdown because Shane Van Gisbergen has turned one of the garage's loudest arguments against him into evidence for his defense. The critics said he was a road course specialist, a temporary disruption, and a driver whose victories exposed a schedule problem rather than complete Cup Series ability. Then the results kept arriving, the margins grew, his oval performances improved, and voices that once explained away his success began speaking about him with respect. That is the apology in this story. It was not one coordinated statement or a dramatic press conference. It was the unmistakable public reversal that happens when criticism can no longer survive the evidence. SVG did not demand anyone retract a word. He made their old words increasingly difficult to repeat. The important question is not simply how one New Zealander became NASCAR's most feared road racer. It is why his form has changed the way rivals judge his entire Cup career, and what that change could mean when the season reaches its decisive stretch. The answer begins with the label NASCAR attached to him, but it ends somewhere his critics never expected. If you believe performance should speak louder than reputation, subscribe and stay with us. Then tell us below, has SVG already become a complete NASCAR threat? Because before anyone could appreciate what Van Gisbergen was building, they first had to understand why so many people were determined to shrink it. Shane Van Gisbergen entered NASCAR carrying credentials that should have commanded immediate respect. He was a three-time Supercars champion, a driver shaped by heavy cars, street circuits, changing grip, and relentless close quarters racing. Yet much of the American audience treated those achievements as foreign currency. Impressive, perhaps, but not automatically valuable inside the Cup garage. Then Chicago happened in 2023. Van Gisbergen won on his Cup debut, becoming the first driver since Johnny Rutherford in 1963 to achieve that feat. It should have ended every question about whether he belonged. Instead, it created a narrower argument. Critics decided the victory proved he could dominate a street course, not that he could master NASCAR. When he won at Mexico City, Chicago, and Sonoma during 2025, the debate became louder. Brad Keselowski argued that NASCAR had too many road courses. Denny Hamlin also said he was not a road course fan and believed the schedule contained too many. Their comments addressed the calendar, but SVG's dominance stood at the center of the conversation. Every win was followed by the same qualifier. Yes, but can he do it on an oval? That question was fair. The dismissive answer was not. Van Gisbergen was being judged as though improvement had an expiration date. Some fans even questioned whether a driver earning postseason access through specialized excellence deserved the opportunity. They treated NASCAR's rules as legitimate for everyone until the unfamiliar driver became too effective at exploiting the chances those rules provided. But here is the thing most people still get wrong about SVG's critics. They were not disproved because road courses suddenly mattered more. They were disproved because Van Gisbergen refused to remain the driver their argument required. The road course victories were not lucky fuel gambles or chaotic accidents. They were controlled demonstrations. At Mexico City in 2025, Van Gisbergen overcame illness, changing conditions, and a competitive field to win. In Chicago, he handled the pressure attached to the place where his NASCAR story began. At Sonoma, repeated late restarts gave the field multiple opportunities to attack him. None worked. Chase Briscoe offered the comparison that captured the imbalance. Racing Van Gisbergen on a road course, he suggested, felt like playing basketball against Michael Jordan. That was not an excuse from an anonymous observer. It was recognition from a Cup winner who had watched SVG execute the details from close range. The technique began with braking. Van Gisbergen carried years of experience manipulating a heavy touring car at the edge of adhesion. He could rotate the car while slowing it, adjust his line during corner entry, and preserve enough rear tire to attack later. Those habits transferred naturally to NASCAR's next-gen car. Yet the advantage was not one secret pedal movement. It was a complete library of reactions developed across thousands of road racing laps. Trackhouse Racing also improved around him. Crew chief Stephen Doran and the number 88 group learned what feedback SVG needed and how to translate his unusual feel into setup direction. The driver brought rare ability. The team gave that ability a stable platform. Once those pieces aligned, competitors were no longer hoping to beat him over an entire race. They were hoping a restart, caution, or strategy split would create one vulnerable moment. Then Watkins Glen in 2026 removed even that comfort. A late pit stop dropped Van Gisbergen to 22nd, nearly 29 seconds behind the lead with 24 laps remaining. That should have ended his winning chance. Instead, he carved through the field, passed Ty Gibbs with 8 laps left, and won by more than 7 seconds. He led 74 of 100 laps and secured his 6th victory across the previous 7 Cup road races. That performance changed the language. Calling him merely good on road courses became absurdly inadequate. He was producing one of the most concentrated stretches of discipline-specific dominance modern NASCAR had seen. The same people who once treated Chicago as a novelty now had to compare him with Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Chase Elliott, and the finest road racers in Cup history. There was still a counter-argument. Road course brilliance did not automatically make him a championship favorite. His first 50 Cup starts showed a dramatic statistical divide between road courses and every other track type. Skeptics could cite that honestly, but the stronger version of their claim required something else. It required SVG to remain irrelevant on ovals. He did not cooperate. Van Gisbergen's oval progress did not begin with a miraculous victory. It appeared through smaller signs that serious observers understand. He qualified more consistently, he stayed in the lead group longer, he communicated changing balance with greater precision. Most importantly, he started recovering during races instead of simply surviving them. At Kansas late in 2025, he produced his first Cup top 10 on a traditional oval. In Atlanta in February 2026, he finished 6th despite 2 spins and chaos around the lead pack. That result was not polished, but it mattered because the raw speed was visible. A driver once portrayed as helpless on ovals had made mistakes, recovered, and still earned his best oval finish. The bigger confirmation arrived at North Wilkesboro. Van Gisbergen passed Denny Hamlin for the lead during a Stage 1 restart. His radio captured the disbelief. He asked what he was supposed to do now that he was leading, and the team jokingly told him to go straight. The exchange was funny because it revealed how unfamiliar the position still felt, but the position was real. He later passed eventual winner Joey Logano for the lead on another restart and led enough laps to establish a new personal oval record. Tire wear eventually cost him, yet this was no road course specialist collecting points at the back. SVG was racing established oval champions at the front and learning in public. The data supported the eye test. He entered North Wilkesboro 31 points above the chase cut line and left 54 above it. One race did not erase years of oval education still ahead. It did demonstrate that his development was affecting the season rather than merely preparing him for some distant future. And this is where the criticism collapsed. The original case against SVG depended on his oval weakness being permanent, but every new lead lap, recovery, and top finish turned that certainty into a moving target. Critics could still say he was better on road courses. Everyone knew that. They could say he needed greater oval consistency. Van Gisbergen himself would agree. What they could no longer say with confidence was that he lacked the capacity to learn NASCAR's central discipline. That difference explains the apology. Nobody needed to walk toward the number 88 hauler with a written retraction. The praise became the retraction. Broadcast analysts highlighted his progress. Rivals discussed his racecraft with greater caution. Fans who once mocked his postseason place began calculating how dangerous he might become if only modest oval improvement continued. Sports apologies rarely arrive with the word sorry. They appear when the old insult disappears. They appear when a rival who once questioned the legitimacy of a driver's success begins explaining why that driver is difficult to beat. They appear when coverage moves from asking whether someone belongs to asking how far he can go. The clearest evidence came from comparison. Briscoe's Michael Jordan remark elevated SVG rather than minimizing him. Other drivers spoke openly about the pressure of racing him on road courses. Analysts stopped presenting his braking style as a trick that competitors would quickly copy. They began describing an experience advantage that could take years to understand and might never be duplicated. Even arguments about reducing road courses accidentally acknowledged his impact. Nobody launches a scheduled debate around an irrelevant driver. The complaints grew because Van Gisbergen had made those races feel predictable, and predictability is uncomfortable when one outsider owns the advantage. NASCAR had not created 6 automatic victories for him, it had created 6 opportunities. He still had to beat every car entered. SVG's response made the reversal more powerful. He did not become combative. When people effectively handed him trophies before road races, he said that attitude bothered him because it disrespected his competition. He recognized Michael McDowell, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, and others as genuine threats. The driver being accused of benefiting from an easy path was the person insisting the path was not easy. That humility denied critics the feud they might have preferred. Van Gisbergen kept returning to preparation, execution, and improvement. He laughed at his mistakes. He praised Trackhouse. He acknowledged weak areas without accepting the conclusion that those weaknesses defined him. This is not a story about every skeptic becoming a supporter. It is not proof that SVG has solved every oval. It is a driver using measurable progress to make an old verdict obsolete, and that makes the next stage far more important than the argument that came before it. The apology then was collective but unofficial. It lived and changed headlines, changed broadcasts, and changed expectations. It was NASCAR conceding through its behavior that Shane Van Gisbergen was no longer visiting its world. He was altering it. A credible case must acknowledge what remains unresolved. Van Gisbergen's road course results still carry a disproportionate share of his Cup success. Through 2025, all 6 of his Cup victories came on road or street circuits, and his average finish away from them was substantially worse. Even his encouraging oval races included errors, uneven tire management, and stretches where experienced rivals controlled the pace. The Cup Championship also demands range. A driver cannot build an entire season around a few specialty events and assume the points will take care of themselves. Intermediate ovals, short tracks, drafting races, and high wear surfaces ask different questions. The chase format may reward victories and consistency differently, but no structure removes the need to perform across months of changing conditions. That is the strongest skeptical position. It is reasonable. What is no longer reasonable is turning not complete yet into incapable of becoming complete. Those statements are not interchangeable. Van Gisbergen came to full-time Cup competition in his mid-30s after building instinct in another category and another country. His rivals had spent childhoods learning oval traffic. Many had raced on American short tracks before they were old enough to drive on public roads. SVG was compressing decades of specialized education into weekly practice sessions with limited track time. Viewed through that lens, his early oval weakness was predictable. His improvement is the surprising part. A 6th at Atlanta, a Kansas top 10, and laps led against Hamlin and Logano do not prove championship mastery. They prove the learning process is producing competitive outcomes. The burden now moves in both directions. Van Gisbergen must turn flashes into repeatable finishes. His critics must judge what is happening rather than defend what they predicted. If the evidence changes, responsible analysis changes with it. That principle matters beyond SVG. NASCAR has always absorbed talent from different disciplines, but outsiders are often asked to prove themselves under a harsher standard. A traditional prospect can struggle for seasons while commentators discuss development. A foreign champion struggles for months and is labeled limited. Van Gisbergen exposed that double standard because his road course victories were too overwhelming to ignore, and his oval gains arrived too quickly to dismiss. The unsettling possibility for the field is not that SVG will continue winning road races. Rivals already know he can do that. The real concern is what happens if his oval baseline rises from the 20s into the teens, and then from the teens toward regular top 10s. He does not need to become Kyle Larson everywhere. He needs to collect solid points where he is still learning, avoid catastrophic weekends, and maximize the tracks where his advantage is greatest. That combination can transform a specialist into a legitimate season-long problem. There is another consequence. SVG's rise forces NASCAR teams to rethink how they evaluate transferable skill. His supercars background was not perfectly aligned with Cup racing, but it gave him braking control, car rotation, adaptability, and comfort with physical racecraft. Those strengths were valuable immediately. The missing oval knowledge could be taught. Future teams may look more seriously at champions from overseas, sports cars, or other disciplines. The lesson is not that any road racer can enter NASCAR and dominate. The lesson is that elite ability deserves patience when the unfamiliar elements are learnable. For current rivals, patience is less comforting. Every month Van Gisbergen spends in Cup cars adds oval references to the road racing instincts he already owns. Every restart beside a champion teaches him what simulations cannot. Every mistake becomes stored information. He does not have to erase his specialty. He can build around it. But NASCAR's biggest mistake was focusing on whether SVG could survive the ovals while ignoring how quickly he was learning to turn his road course advantage into a dangerous season-long championship threat for everyone around him. The schedule argument therefore misses the larger threat. Removing a road course course might reduce one opportunity. It would not remove the driver's growing understanding of the remaining tracks. Changing the calendar cannot reverse his education. Shane Van Gisbergen's loudest critics were entitled to question his oval record. They were entitled to argue about the schedule and debate how NASCAR should reward different forms of excellence. But they were not entitled to freeze a developing driver at the weakest point of his transition and call that snapshot a final answer. SVG answered without outrage. He won when everyone expected him to win, which is often harder than surprising the field once. He recovered when strategy pushed him backward. He protected tires, adapted his braking, and began racing at the front on ovals. Most importantly, he kept improving after critics decided they had already identified his limit. That is why NASCAR feels different around him now. The garage no longer sees a guest collecting road course trophies. It sees a competitor whose best discipline is historic and whose weakest discipline is moving in the right direction. Respect arrived because resistance became intellectually exhausting. The story is not complete. His next poor oval finish will revive the same criticism. His next road course win will restart the schedule debate. That tension will follow him because specialists are judged by their weaknesses, while ordinary drivers are often judged by their strengths. But the old certainty is gone. Van Gisbergen removed it one braking zone, one restart, and one recovery at a time. Every storyline surrounding him now leads to the same question. Can his oval improvement mature quickly enough to support his road course dominance when the season reaches its hardest races? Nothing is guaranteed. Everything is changing. Drop SVG in the comments and tell us whether his critics genuinely changed their minds or simply ran out of excuses. If fearless performance and honest NASCAR analysis matter to you, subscribe. We cover all of it, and next time we will examine the oval detail that could decide how high SVG can climb.